in a position of leadership? Is it because you see yourself as a leader? Is it because you enjoy being a leader? There's a lot of different aspects to it. And so as you heard yesterday, you really, as we talked about a spectrum of management versus leadership, there really is sort of a spectrum of being a leader. And so you lead yourself, which is important no matter whether you decide you're going to be sort of an independent contributor leader, or you're going to lead others, or you're going to lead an organization. And so I think it's really hard to lead others or an organization if you're not leading yourself. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that, but there are different sort of components when you think about being a leader. And so I think anybody who is a leader should be asking themselves, why should anyone follow you? I mean, that's what a leader does. You have a group of people who are working with you to accomplish a goal. And so ask yourself, how do you treat the people who work with you? Are you respectful? Do you think about them and acknowledge them publicly for their accomplishments? Do you make them feel as though you care about them? It's really important. I mean, people are here to get work done, but to feel as though they're engaged and they're contributing. And so you want to be very supportive of the team that are working with you, because otherwise, why should anybody follow you? And so it's an important thing, I think, for everybody to ask. So what I want us to do now, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to think about a leader that you know. I mean, you all work with people who are leaders, you see leaders. Maybe it's somebody you don't even know and you've never met, but you admire them for some reason. And why do you admire them? So let's take just a couple of minutes. You can jot down some things about why you do admire them, but I want us to sort of think about people that we know who are leaders. Why do we admire them as leaders? So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do that, and then we can just hear what other people say. Important, I keep hearing the word impact, how important that is and how we admire people who do have an impact. I think those are really great examples. I'll move on to my next slide. I also want us to think about from like day to day of working with people, sort of what is it that those people demonstrate as far as behaviors that we admire. Like, why do we want to work with those people on a day-to-day basis? Now that we've sort of have that basis and foundation for how important impact is to bring to people. So I'll go to the next slide and say, well, how do leaders lead? And so this is sort of what I've been talking about, in that it's really your behavior, how you act and behave as a leader is what's really important. So there's the toolbox on the left, and so you have to have these skills and knowledge in order to be a leader, but it's also how you behave is really important. And so I'm going to tell you a case which for me was like, well, why would anybody follow this person? And what are the behaviors that this person has that are probably not very helpful, and why is that important? And so this is a case that did not happen at CHOP. It had happened at another institution where I was working, and they wanted to have someone lead the cardiac cath lab. And so they were looking for a new medical director of the lab. And there was a national search that was done, and there were some key people who were identified as potential leaders for this lab. And there was one person in particular that they thought, yeah, this is going to be great. If we could get this person, he's got the knowledge, he's got the skills, he's really good in procedures, he's been publishing, this guy is amazing. And so they decide to recruit this person, comes to the organization, and what his role was going to be was to teach the fellows how to do cardiac cath procedures, develop the program, work with the nurses and the schedulers. And so everybody's excited. He comes to the institution, he starts working, and about 3 months later, the division chief of cardiology starts hearing from people he is a problem, that he is not being supportive of the fellows, He's talking like the fellows really don't seem to understand how to do procedures. They can't really do them very well. He's treating the nursing staff horribly. He's not treating the schedulers well. And the organization is not thriving because of it. And so you can imagine how this is pretty disruptive. One thing to know is that he being the division chief, had no idea that this was going on. And so that can be pretty common, where people can manage up pretty well, but they don't manage their staff very well. And it's an important thing to be aware of, that you should be treating people really the same no matter where they are in the organization if you want to be an authentic leader. And so think about, you're in a meeting and the meeting is still going on, and you have somebody sitting in your office that's scheduled to meet with you, say at 11 o'clock. It's 11:10, this other meeting is going late. If that person in the office is your boss, do you get up and leave that meeting to go and talk with your boss? Now think about if that was a medical student in your office. Would you get up and leave that meeting to go and talk with the medical student? There's a distinction there, right? Like, of course I'd go and talk to my boss. But if you're really somebody who is respectful of people and people's time, if you're an authentic leader, it doesn't matter who is sitting in your office. You can easily excuse yourself and say, I've got somebody who's waiting for me and I need to leave the meeting. So think about how we treat people, because I know in medicine, there's this hierarchy, right? I mean, everybody's at a different level. But if you're a leader who really has certain values in how you treat people, in how you behave, think about the message that you're giving when you treat one person different than the other. And it doesn't matter if they're, senior to you, if they're subordinate, so to speak. You as a leader, in how you decide is important to you, is really important, no matter who you're working with. So just something to think about. So this person did not do very well. Let me tell you what has to happen in a situation like this. The medical director of this cardiac lab has to be told there's a problem. So what's really interesting is some people don't understand their behavior is a problem. They think it's okay. Like, he acted like he had no idea this was an issue. And that's pretty common. People just don't always understand. Like, it might be pretty obvious to me or to you that behavior is not acceptable. But the person who's doing it sometimes just doesn't understand it's a problem. So somebody's got to tell him it's a problem. Number two, he's got to want to change. So if he doesn't change, it's a disaster for the cardiac lab, right? And then the team, the nurses, the fellows, they have to accept him back that he actually is changing. And if he's done so much damage, then that is just not going to work. And this person did not change, and he had to leave the institution. So it's important to really be thinking about how you behave as a leader. And so this is just a little cartoon. People don't realize their behavior is a problem. There's an interview. Wow, you have 3 master's degrees and a PhD. Probably should throw in an MD. Yes, it's all very impressive, but interestingly, I have no common sense whatsoever. And then the interviewer says, well, that's not the sort of thing you should say during a job interview. I don't see why not. So people just don't always understand things. And so that's why they need to be told. So I would say that emotional intelligence is so important, and I'm so glad that you got to have that lecture yesterday and hear more about it. This is the Goleman model of emotional intelligence. The key point here is that emotional intelligence is a better predictor of leadership than IQ. Now, you have to have a certain threshold, you have to have a certain IQ in order to be a leader, but anybody who's gone through medical school obviously has that capability. But the person who has that capability and is an emotionally intelligent leader is by far going to go much further than than the person who doesn't have emotional intelligence. And so these are the 5 components that Goleman talks about. Self-awareness, just give you a couple examples. Self-awareness would be, say you're writing a research grant and you know that you can be a bit of a procrastinator, kind of wait until the last minute to get the grant written, but you have other people that need to help and provide information in that grant. If you're waiting to the last minute to do that, you're throwing everybody else off. So your strength is you're a really good writer, but your weakness is you wait until the last moment in order to get it done, and that really throws other people off. Another example would be the empathy and self-regulation. So say you have somebody who wants to write an article with you and they've written something up, a first draft, you look at it, you're like, this is just not even close to what I was thinking of or what we wanted to have happen. So you need to self-regulate yourself, right? You need to not blow up at this person and say you are way off the mark. I've seen where people will take papers and scratch out in red, no, this is not what you want to be doing. And so you kind of have to pull back and say, how would that person feel if they got this paper with everything crossed out and not exactly what you thought? So you're not helping to motivate that person by behaving that way. So kind of regulate yourself, pull yourself back in, and don't necessarily do that. So this is another one. We're all walking around with phones, right? Do you mind if I strap your phone to my forehead so I can pretend you're looking at me when I talk? Think about the message that you are giving people. Think about if you're at a conference and you're sitting there in the front row looking at your phone, or you're sitting there looking at your computer. What do you guys think? What is the message that that person's getting who's sitting there? Anybody? You don't care. Yep. You don't matter. I don't care what you have to say. Right? I mean, that's horrible. I see that a lot. I'm surprised at how often that is. And so you really, how many times you go to a restaurant and you see people sitting there looking at their phones, right? I mean, we got to get away from these phones because it really is sending the wrong message. You don't matter. This is more important to me than you. Okay, so we kind of talked about behaviors of leaders. I really want us to be talking about some behaviors, right? So what would you say on a day-to-day basis is the behavior of a really bad leader? People you've worked with that you would say, that behavior really bothers me. And the whole purpose of going through this is for us to really, sort of drill into our minds, what is the behavior of a good leader and the type of leader that I want to be versus what's the behavior of someone who is not really somebody who I would want to follow, who I'd want to lead me. Thoughts? Yes. Yeah, somebody was telling me an example last week where you're in a meeting and you've got the one negative person who's just saying all these negative things about what you're trying to achieve. And so, I mean, that doesn't help, right? It's what are the opportunities and how can you it's not motivating at all. Yeah, it kind of brings the whole team and the whole group down, right? Yeah. People that think they can work alone. Yeah, we all go through medical school sort of alone, right? And trying to achieve and get really good grades. And, we're sort of in that environment until you get into a situation in which you're working with other people and how important it is to do that and collaborate. How annoying is that if somebody else takes credit for your work or for the work of somebody else? You really do want to make sure that you're giving credit to the people that you're working with. How many people have sent an email to somebody, ask them a question, and they don't get back to you? What message is that? It's sort of like the phone, or you send an email, ask a question, and they don't get back to you. I think it's an important aspect for a leader to get back to your people. And sometimes that's one line that you've got the message, or I'll get back to you. But get back to your people. Don't have them send you an email and have you not get to it. And we're all busy, right? But I can tell you that some of the busiest people I work with get back to me in less than 24 hours, and sometimes within that day. So that's important to people, because you're sending a message, you're important to me, I will answer your question. Timeliness is really important. How about emails where it's in all caps? You don't want to send an email that is expressing emotion. Email is not for emotions, All right, emotions, you can really have a problem if you send emails that have emotions in there. You want to just state the facts, you want them clear, you want it straightforward, you don't want a whole, paragraphs of information. If you need to do that, you should pick up the phone. Or if you have a message you want to give somebody, it's better to get in front of them and talk to them. Don't send emails that have a lot of emotion in it or a lot of words in it, because people can misconstrue what you're thinking with what they're reading. How many times have you read an email on your phone and you're like, are they kidding? Like, really? Sometimes if you read it on your computer, it's a little bit different. If you have a reaction to an email, you feel like you got to get back to them, do that, but don't send it right away. You're sort of that 24-hour rule. You can type it, it might make you feel better because you can't believe what they just said to you, but think about it and reread it the next day. Is that something you really want to send? Are you promoting a good relationship with that person by behaving that way? Again, it's your behavior, it's your action as a leader that's so important. So I think we talked about some of the worst leaders. We talked about some of the best ones before, so we can go on. Okay, so this is where I want to talk a little bit about values. And I think where values can really help you, where they've helped me, is in making decisions. And so values impact your behaviors. We're talking about your behaviors and your actions. And what you value, sort of your core values, helps you in how you behave. And so values are beliefs that guide our decisions and actions, sort of that example of you're in a meeting, are you being respectful for whoever is sitting in your office, doesn't matter if it's your boss or it's a medical student. Again, people see your behavior, and through behavior, you are influencing people, you're motivating them, you're inspiring them, you're guiding them. So this is a list of values. There's a whole bunch of them, and they may mean one definition to one person versus another. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but I had a decision a couple of weeks ago that I had to make, and I was trying to decide, should I do this or should I do that? And I realized one of my core values is to be respectful of people. And I knew it was more respectful if I reached out to somebody to talk about what I was going to do versus just do it. And so sometimes I fall back on what my core values are when I have to make a tough decision. And that's happened a lot throughout my career. And so this is sort of getting back to thinking about creating a vision for your own leadership. Kind of self-reflect on what kind of leader are you currently? What kind of leader do you want to be? And what changes might you make in order to become the leader that you want to be? Well, thank you for doing this. Promise me you will finish it if you haven't finished it yet. And promise me you'll take a look at it in 3 months from now, right? So it's so important to do these things, but to be thinking about how to sustain it, because it's very easy to not do it, first of all, but then when you do it, you want to make sure that you look back at it and follow through on that.